with water and sewer. And Scott, if you could introduce yourself and your colleagues, I'd appreciate it. And I would note that Councilman Hager and Councilman Pridemore are with us.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. I'm Scott Potter, Director of Metro Water Services. To my right is Tony Newmeyer, Assistant Director of Finance, and to my left is Heidi Weigel, who works for Tony in Finance. We're glad to be here and pleased to present our requested budget to you this morning, sir. I think my presentation will be very short and hopefully non-eventful because I'm requesting a status quo budget. I'll talk a little bit about that, and I'll talk a little bit about performance to date, and really that's going to conclude my request. Revenue request is going to be, once again, at $208 million for 2016. That we feel really good about that projection. And expense on the water and sewer side is $119,176,000, and that matches last year's budget request. I'll talk a little bit about projections for this year as well. And on the stormwater side, we are requesting a status quo budget as well. The revenue is running almost exact for a three-year period. So we feel really good about projections, and we feel really good about recovery of the revenue that we're supposed to get. On the expense, it should match revenue, and that's what we're requesting. Discussing this year's financial performance, the revenues to date exceed last year by about $4 million, and that's really not due to a whole lot of extra use. I think that's specifically due to growth, and that is, I think, good news, and we've seen that over a 4-year period. If you look at 2012, revenue in February was 129.3, and this year it's 147. Now there were one more year of rate increase in that 4-year period, but most of that revenue growth, I think, has been from growth within the county.
New customers.
Yes, sir. New customers and additional use of existing customers. So we feel really good about revenues. We think we're going to exceed forecast this year a little bit, but we feel good about the request or the projection for revenue for next year. On expense, good news is this year through February, expense is $69.2 million versus last year is $71.4 million. So this year we spent less than last year, even with the challenging winter we had. We assign those savings mostly to power. We've been really aggressive in reducing our electricity expenses, and with some savings on labor. We're a little bit below budget on budgeted positions, so that's helped us a little bit on savings. We need to correct that. We need to get to our budgeted level of positions because we do have a lot of turnover happening within the utility, a lot of retirements, and we need to, I think, train the next generation of employees within Metro Water Services. We feel good about where we're going to be at the conclusion of the fiscal year. I'm relatively certain we'll be under budget, not dramatically, but I think we'll be within 1 to 2% under budget on expense. Labor costs have been relatively flat over the course of the last several years, and we feel good about overtime expense. So I think that cost center is under control. On stormwater, from a revenue perspective, like I told the mayor earlier, the revenue charts are almost exactly flat, and that should be what we see because the amount of land obviously in the county isn't increasing, and we've got really good coverage on what our revenue projection should be, and we're collecting what we should be collecting. And on expense, we've got really good ability to control how much we spend, essentially through the C projects, and we can spend right up to our budget, and that's what we do. We match the expenditures to budget as close as we can to make sure we do as much work as we can throughout the county. On the stormwater labor side, we're good to go as well. We need to get up to budgeted number of positions because we're really not able at this point to do as much work on the maintenance side as we'd like to, just because we need to get those folks hired, but we're working on that. Our cost per gallon, we've started closely tracking our cost per gallon production, and that's been flat as well. That's good news because that demonstrates really good cost control on electricity because, like I said earlier, we're selling more water, we're making more water, and we're also treating more wastewater, so it's good news that our cost per gallon is remaining flat. We've got a lot of performance results that we could discuss. I really don't want to go into a lot of really deep detail other than we've had really good results on Safe Drinking Water Act compliance and Clean Water Act compliance, which obviously is our most important thing from an operational perspective. We've had a good year. We've got capital demand throughout the city. I think we're meeting it. But I feel good about where we are, and I feel good about our budget request, and I'm happy to request a status quo budget on both sides of the fence as far as water and sewer and stormwater goes. That concludes my request, and I'll gladly take questions from the mayor.
Well, we're happy to receive the status quo request. Can you, a couple things. First, let's talk about stormwater. The stormwater fee, which we implemented during, I guess, the first term.
Yes, sir.
That's allowed you to do lots of work that hadn't been done for years. How is that program overall working?
I think it's performing very well. We've seen a significant reduction, as an example, in the number of phone calls requesting service. We've tracked that over the course of the life of the stormwater fee, and at the beginning of the fee, we were getting over 1,000 phone calls a month. In March, as an example, we received 449 phone calls about stormwater service. It's cyclical, and it does match the rainy season, so we'll get more calls as an example.
Coming up here now.
Yes, sir. But we're able to do work throughout the county that's directly resulted in improving of the stormwater infrastructure. One of the frustrating things is we'd always like to do more, but I think with the resources we've been given, we've been successful, and we've got really good data to support the work that we've done has resulted in improvements. We're not wasting money. There's always going to be more work to do, but I think we've been really successful in identifying the chronic things, especially on the maintenance side, and we've been able to address them. Good news, bad news from a water perspective is we're a water-rich county. We've got a lot of streams, a lot of stormwater conveyances. We have over 20,000, actually over 50,000 stormwater inlets as an example. So the work's always going to be there, but I think we've been successful in doing the work to identify the chronic problems and to solve them, and we're going to continue to do that. And it's going to be work that's into the future.
Do you still maintain the list of what you did by A, B, and C projects?
We transitioned out of the B projects because essentially the A project and the C project we don't really talk about it that way anymore. It's more capital and maintenance. And generally speaking now, the A projects that we would have talked about 8 years ago would be capital because they're more significant. And then the C project is going to be maintenance on existing infrastructure. And we address those in two ways. We address those with our own crews and with also external crews. So we do a lot more work on maintenance than we do on capital, but we do capital work as well, and that's when we've been most successful in identifying and beginning to eliminate the chronic stuff. So we tried to kind of change the discussion, but once I think it got into the vernacular, everyone still thinks of it A, B, and C, but we're trying to think of it more as a significant capital or a maintenance operation.
Okay. And you've had, we would have periodically, water mains break.
Yes, sir.
All right. And you have, I guess also during the first term, we did the adjustment on the water rate.
Yes, sir.
But prior to that, you really had no bonding capacity, and now you have that capacity.
Yes, sir.
Can you talk a little bit about your investment in infrastructure and in what's underground here to keep our city moving?
It's we have a historic system. We have pipes in the ground that were put in the 1800s, the 1900s, and the 2000s. I think visible projects that people might remember was the significant work we did downtown when we had the big break in, I guess, on New Year's. But that's representative of work we've done throughout the county. We've got infrastructure work presently happening all over the county that's replacing mains that have a propensity to fail. Part of how we assign projects is through a matrix of risk, and we prioritize how we do the replacements based on the level of risk. Good news is the stuff that's really, really bad, we're able to address as a result of the rate increases and the ability to establish a bonding capacity. So in our business, you could always do more, but I feel good about what we've been able to do and what we're doing presently. I think we're being prudent, and I think we're being successful in identifying and replacing the mains that need to be replaced.
And in terms when the mains that have, in recent years, that we've had problems with, I mean, you go back to the downtown incident, which was early in the first term, when they had freezing temperatures downtown and all over the city, and the pipes that were there, those were like 1870 pipes, right?
Yes, sir. To be specific, is 1884 is when they were put in.
It was a good year. And then you had recently, sort of outside the downtown area, you had breakage which occurred on pipes that were put in the 1970s. Mm-hmm. So it really depends on a variety of factors where the attention has to be or what's going on with those particular pipes.
That's correct. A lot of it is pipe material. There's a huge historical element to the water business. And as an example, before World War II, there was a lot of thin-walled cast iron put in systems, not only in Nashville, but throughout the eastern United States. And they have proven to be problematic because they were thin-walled and they break under pressure, especially when it's cold and the ground is moving and heaving as a result of freezing and thawing. In the 1970s, we put in some pipe that perhaps the material wasn't the best selection, but at the time it seemed like a good idea. What we do now is we are very diligent about identifying the proper type of material that we use to do main replacements and new installation. And I feel good that in 50 to 100 years, whoever's sitting in this chair or the chair across the mirror at that point isn't going to be speaking ill of us for the decisions that we made, in 2016, 2015 about the types of pipe that we put in the ground.
And this year, for actually longer than just this past year, you've been involved in a program to respond to what happened in 2010 with the flood, and you came forward with an ambitious idea regarding pumping stations and a flood wall. Could you talk about that idea, where we are on that, and how that would keep Nashville safer?
Yes, sir. I think ambitious is a good word. In the summer of 2010, following the May 2010 flood, excuse me, we began the process of identifying how we could mitigate flooding countywide. And over the course of the next 5 years, we did work outside of downtown, and we also identified a project within downtown that would eliminate the damage that was done as a result of May 2010. So as part of our design criteria, we identified what it would take to remove the flooding that occurred downtown and also give us an element of safety. We're between 30% and 90% design at this point. We expect to complete design by the summer and hopefully begin construction late this summer. The good news is we have been really aggressive in vetting the design and identifying the areas of risk, and we've had various experts look at the design. I feel really good about where we are. I feel really good about how the system as a whole will work, and I'm convinced that once we build this system, the risk to downtown as a result of the May 2010 flood will be mitigated. It's a good project, and I think it's something that we're responsible to bring forward to help protect our economic core and significant parts of the water and sewer infrastructure to be protected. So I'm really enthusiastic about the project. I think it'll work, and I think it's absolutely.
Okay, that's what he's qualified a little bit there.
It's a good project, Mr. Mayor. It'll work.
I think the important thing too is obviously this is a project that would be contained within your budget and the funds that you have generated or can produce. I mean, you're very different than most metro departments. You live off the revenue that is created by your department, and you have, I don't know, you say separate bonds, but the revenue bonds that are paid through the revenues generated by your department, and that's what would pay for this project.
Yes, sir. And as a result of a lot of Rich's work, we're in good shape when it comes to our bonding capacity, our bonding structure, and one of the unique things about us is our planning horizon is 1 year, 5 years, 25 years, 50 years, 100 years. And we've got to get 25 years, 50 years, 100 years out. And the flood wall is a perfect example of that planning process, in that that investment will result in a 100-year protection of downtown. And we'll bond it, and we'll pay for it. But it's
And
a
you'll
good
pay
investment.
for it in paying for the bonds, and that amount is something that's manageable, certainly easily manageable by the water department. But I think one way to look at it is that's almost like paying an insurance premium. That you look at the hundreds of millions of dollars of damage that occurred in downtown, occurred elsewhere in the county, but that is insurance to keep that from happening again.
I think it's a perfect way to look at it. It's between 7 and 8 million in debt service per year. We have the ability to absorb it presently. We certainly have the ability to absorb it when you look into the future. And when you look at the potential damage to our infrastructure, the potential damage to the economic downtown, I think I'm obligated, I think, to do this project, and that's why I feel so strongly about it.
And another thing I would stress is, as a non-engineer, as a lawyer, when you explain what's going on, I'm sort of like that Sam Cooke song. I look at the pictures and I turn the pages, but this is not some new theoretical design. This is hard science that has pumping stations and walls that have been used for many years, and this is not some far-fetched thing. This is hardcore stuff that people do on a regular basis.
Yes, sir. My close friend and colleague, Terry Cobb, points out that I'm not a guessing kind of guy, and that's how I feel. I don't guess. And my colleagues in the engineering world that we work with don't guess either. We work to use good technology, but this is not cutting edge, and it's not technology that hasn't been proven. It's serious civil engineering, but it's just valves, it's just pumps, it's just moving rock. It's not like we're doing anything that we haven't done a lot of times before. It's a significant project, it's big, but we've done this before, and we know how to do it. And we have the experts working on it who do this for a living. So one thing I'm not going to do is propose and build a project that I'm going to be crossing my fingers, while it's raining, hoping it's going to work. I'm going to be sure it's going to work. And we've built in lots of protections, lots of contingencies to protect against failures that might occur. Now, nothing's perfect, but this is a solid design.
Which leads to the other question in terms of the impact on East Nashville. Could you describe that, the other east bank of the river?
We've done significant hydraulic modeling of the river, and the specific answer is, in May 2010, if that flood occurred and we had the system built, the flooding on East Nashville wouldn't have been mitigated, but it only would have gone up by 1/16 of an inch. And the flow rate in the river would have gone up by 0.4 feet per second. That sounds like difficult numbers to really believe, but that's not a guess. That's what the model shows. And the easy way to think about it is the only thing we're changing of the river and it's how it functions is we're moving some storage on the dry side of the levee, and we're displacing it into the entire drainage basin. So we're not putting more water onto East Bank. The exact same amount of water is going into the river as was before. It's just we're just losing a little bit of storage, and specifically 630 acres worth of storage, and that's going into several million square feet of storage on the riverside. So we've got the ability to prove that technologically, but it's 1/16 of an inch and 0.4 feet per second. That's the answer.
That's like what, a half of a quarter?
It's the width of a nickel.
Width of a nickel. The other thing I wanted to ask you about with that is this program, this plan for the pumps and the flood wall. This isn't the end of what Nashville needs to do in terms of flood mitigation.
We have spectacular job security when it comes to water and sewer infrastructure, stormwater infrastructure, flood mitigation, as we discussed earlier, we're blessed with a wonderful water source. It also rains a lot in our part of the world. We get over 50 inches of rain. So when it comes to flood mitigation, specifically as a result of May 2010, we're always going to be working to mitigate risk countywide. It's not going to stop with downtown. It's not going to stop with the east side of the river downtown. It's not going to stop outside of downtown. That's part of our job. We'll continue to do that forever.
And you've been involved in the years since the flood and actually before the flood in flood mitigation all over the city in terms of purchasing of homes, protecting the floodway. Could you describe some of that?
Yes, sir. The best way to remove a risk in the floodway is to remove the structure. And I'm fond of saying that solves two problems. It eliminates the person in the home being at risk, and it eliminates the risk of the person having to go rescue the person who's in the home to begin with. So, excuse me. So, working with council as an example, they enacted a prohibition of development in the floodway, which was, in my opinion, very prudent. Doing that has eliminated making the problem worse. So in the meantime, we've identified structures, over 200, that were in the floodway that we bought out and returned to the city's use. Presently, we've got a park, we've got urban farm, we've got green space, we've got greenways that are there now that weren't there, that were occupied residences before the flood. So to me, that's perfect. We've enhanced the watershed. We've helped people, I think, recover economically much better than they would have tried to sell a home that was in the floodway to begin with. So comprehensively, it was a good solution to a established problem.
Okay.
You
want to do the math?
Can I do a little math? Yeah. Can I just elaborate on a couple points that you sort of brought up and just end it with Scott, just because I think it's important, because there's a lot of discussion about we can't afford our infrastructure and all that. And let me say that we've worked really closely with Scott and his department to put the department in a position where they're going to be able to meet their infrastructure needs over the coming years. Through the rate increase that was put into effect several years ago, as you said, Mayor, when you took office, there was really no bonding capacity left in the water department. That is not the case. As you leave office, the water department has a lot of bonding capacity and will be able to prudently exercise and do the capital needs, projects it needs to do over the coming years within its available revenues, which means no rate increase for the foreseeable future, and yet they're going to be able to meet their operating needs and their capital. And part of that is because the department has done a good job in controlling their operating cost. Scott's coming here today with a status quo budget, which is important, but you can have some revenue growth next year, but you're going to keep your budget at status quo. That means you have more money flowing to the bottom line, which means you have more money to spend for cash for projects and more ability to issue more debt. And so we have a good plan in place. We're going to go to the council next week for approval to do a short-term commercial paper program for water department like we have for the city on this GO bonds, which will allow it to borrow money to meet its capital needs at very low cost. If you look at the department's debt structure, in a few years, their debt drops precipitously, which means they have capacity to put new debt in there without raising rates, but make the infrastructure needs that we need. So, we're in pretty good shape in this department, and we left it. It's in much better shape than it was a few years ago, and obviously Scott and his team have done a good job, and it's really, I think, one of the things we've worked on really hard over the last few years, and I felt like I needed to say that.
Yeah, I think another thing I would say to that I think maybe most people understand, but I'm not sure everybody understands. When the water department does a stormwater or a water or a sewer capital project, this was said earlier, but I'm going to say it again. It's funded from rates that we all pay. It's not funded from my property taxes or your property taxes. It doesn't, every dollar you spend doesn't take money away from a sidewalk or a road or a library or a park. It's not how it works. And so I think it's important that everybody understand that you've managed that department well. We made the rate adjustments. When we made the rate adjustments, you're in a position today to fund your capital needs going forward for the next 5 to 10 years, something, who knows? I don't know what all those are, whatever that, it's a lengthy period of time. And when you do a capital project, it's not a project that's taken away from somebody else's ability to do another different kind of project. I think it's important for people to understand that.
And if I can say one thing, our relationship with Public Works is an example, and when we talk about us doing projects, we don't do that alone. We work with Public Works to make sure that we're not digging up a street that they just...
Got a lot better at that.
And we're doing a project right now with Public Works on Harding Place about they're doing a sidewalk and we're doing water mains together. That way we're fixing two problems at once. And I think that shows that we're working really well together.
And we should give credit to the council and to the people in Nashville, because when we did the stormwater fee, which Nashville had talked about for as long as I can remember, of doing something about stormwater, and then did the water rates so that we had the bonding capacity that you needed. The council, it wasn't a unanimous vote, but the council overwhelming got it, that's part of the responsibility of doing government. And we did it during the recession, as I recall.
Yes, sir, we did.
And the voters got it. I mean, it was not an issue. So, and I think this takes me back to the flood plan. You got to invest in ourselves. You got to invest in the future, and your department is very much about that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your work on the storms. I've said thank you for previous storms, and
We need to have less storms.
you have less storms. And
Work on that, Adrian.
I'll get all over that.
and your work with OEM, and you've done a great job.
Thank you, sir. I'm blessed to work here, and I'm blessed to work with everyone throughout the government. It's been wonderful.
Good. Thank you. Thank
Sir.
you all.